Welcome back everyone. So we are continuing with the second semester, that's semester 2, foundation course number 4. We are talking about unit 1 vocabulary. The last program we looked at certain questions as a practice to find out what is a synonym and antonym. Now we are going to talk about prefix and suffix. So what do we mean by prefixes and suffixes? That's a plural form. Prefix and suffix is singular form. So you have a root word, for example in this case it's comfort. You add a prefix and that prefix with suffix and that becomes uncomfortable. Now I can just add a prefix to the word comfort and say discomfort. For example, regular, I can just add a prefix and say irregular, and I add a suffix as well and make it irregularly. I can have a root word which is organize, add a prefix disorganized along with suffix. Confident, confidently, unconfidently, respectful or respect. If I can just say respectful or respectfully or disrespectful, disrespectfully. So whenever I'm adding something in the beginning of the root word, that's a prefix. When I'm adding something at the end of the root word, that becomes a suffix. Alright. Now there are certain rules in terms of the pronunciation and in terms of spelling, and you also need to learn how to understand the prefix and suffix in terms of the usage. So how can you learn them? Tip 1 is study the rules, what the rules are. So let's look at rule number 1. Rule number 1 says when ing is added, keep the y. It's as simple as that. Let me increase the font size so that it's clearly visible to all of you. This is just to ensure that when you guys are watching the program on a different format, it's visible. So the first rule says when I have a word and I'm adding ing, it says keep the y. In case if the word has y, if the root word has y, you need to retain it, you need to keep it. Okay. So here are the examples. And the second one, I'm just trying to magnify this a bit more so that it's clearly visible to all of you. All right, here we go. So rule number 1, when you are adding an ing as suffix, when ing is added, it says keep the y. In what circumstances? If you have the word cry, you can say crying. If you have cries, that's a past tense form, cries, cried. If you have study, you can make it studying. The present tense is studies and the past tense is studied. The next rule, the part of the rule 1, it says when a vowel comes before y, then keep the y. If you have a vowel, for example CRY doesn't have a vowel before y, but if you have obey, you have a vowel before that. Even in that case, keep the y. The examples: obey, obeyed, obeying, obeys and obeyer, those are different forms. Let me remove this to avoid any kind of confusion. Okay. Then you have say, which is a present tense form. The past tense is said and the continuous form is saying. Now S-A-Y-I-N-G, you have an A before Y, that's a vowel. In that case, you will retain the Y. So that is rule number 1. Okay. Rule number 2, I'm just trying to make it look much more easier to view. That's why I'm making these changes now, because on the screen it looks pretty different, right? Okay, let me change this as well. All right, here we go. So I have put in 3 examples here with 3 different sub rules. And this is mainly rule number 2. All right, here we go. Rule number 2 says, drop silent E if the ending begins with a vowel. What do I mean by that? For example, if I have the word advance, I am not saying or pronouncing that as advance. If I have a word surprise or cause, I do not say surprisey or causey, right? So E is silent at the end of the word. So it says drop silent E, that's a letter, if the ending begins with a vowel. Okay. So I have advance plus ing is advancing. So I do not have the E here. If I have a surprise, I have surprising. For example, cause, I have causing. So these kind of trainings are causing a lot of impact. So I do not use the E anymore. Part of rule 2 is keep silent E if the ending begins with a consonant sound. So if it's a vowel sound, I will drop the E. If it's a consonant, then I will keep the E. So keep or retain E if the ending begins with a consonant. For example, advancement. So E-M-E-N-T, advancement, I keep the E here. For example, like and ness, I do not drop the E, I just say likeness. Then it says, if a vowel comes before silent E, drop the silent E. So in terms of argument, I have E here, but before that I have a vowel. In that case, if I am adding a suffix which is ment, argument, I will not use the E anymore. The best example is true. I add a suffix ly. True, truly. The spelling of truly is not T-R-U-E-L-Y, it's T-R-U-L-Y. All right. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 3, I want to expand this just a bit more. So here are the examples for you. All right, here we go. Rule number 3, doubling final consonant with when adding ed, ing or a suffix. It basically means single final consonant and follows a single vowel, and the suffix begins with a vowel. One syllable or it's stressed, stressed on the last syllable. In the example, the TROL syllable is control is stressed, while the EN in the enter is stressed. Basically, it means if I have control, controlling, controlled, controllable, enter, entering. When I say enter, my syllable stress is on N. When I say entering, it's still on N, but when I say entered, my syllable stress is on TER, third. So that's rule number 3 for you. There are some more examples which is mentioned here. Let me expand this font size as well. The reason I am changing the font size now, because when I am seeing it on your TV screen, it's not really looking legible. All right. So if I have the word admit, I add ed, that becomes admitted. Admit is 2 syllable, admit, when I add an ed, it becomes 3 syllables. Admit ends with a consonant and follows a vowel, accented on the last syllable, therefore the double before the adding ing or ed. For example, I am adding 2 t's here, admit, admitting, admitted. So when I am using an ed here, I am adding another consonant. For example, flap, F-L-A-P. When I am saying flapped, that is the past tense. Okay, so if I have the word flap, I am adding ed, flapped, I am adding one more p here, but still it will be 1 syllable only. All right. Now examples when not to double the consonants. Now the earlier one we saw where we need to double the consonant. Here we are talking about where you need not double the consonants. Example number 1. When there are 2 syllables with the stress on the first syllable, do not double the consonant before. For example, counsel, counseling. So when I have the word like counsel and I am adding a suffix which is ing, that becomes counseling. When there are 2 syllables with the stress on the first syllable, so what is my first syllable on counsel? It's coun. Counsel, do not double the consonant before. When there are 2 vowels together before the consonant, do not double the consonant. For example, despair. Now in despair, I have 2 syllables, dis and pair. And there are 2 vowels here, a and I. If I am adding an ed, even then I will not double the consonant. In the previous example, like flabbed, admitted, I added a consonant. Here I am not adding any consonant. Rule number 4, words that end in C. For example, change, there are some examples here. Change the C to CK. Wherever you have any word that's ending with C, if you are adding an ing form, you also need to add a K along with it. For example, panic will become panicking. Picnic will become picnicking. All right. So, panic, panicking, you are adding a K there. I, M and P exceptions. Now, there are some exceptions to the rules. Let me quickly tell you what those rules are. Now, the alignment needs to be changed because of the screen dimension. That's why I'm making these changes. All right, here are the exceptions. I, M and P exception. With some verbs, the ending in I, M and P, you can either double the consonant or not. For example, travel will become traveling or traveling. Both are fine. One is American English, one is British English. TRAVELING is American English. TRAVELLING is British English. Program, programming, MING or programming, MMING. Again, MMING is British English, MING is American English. Worship and worshipping with 2 P's and 1 P. 2 P is British English or Victorian English. PING is American English. All right. Now, let's talk about the prefix. Prefix means something you are adding before the word. Adding a prefix seldom changes the spelling of a word. Usually, it means it does not change the spelling of the word. You just add a prefix in the beginning. Let's look at some examples. Spelled, misspelled, necessary, unnecessary, satisfied, dissatisfied, interested, disinterested, inform, misinform. So, basically I am adding a prefix and it is also adding a syllable. I am not changing the spelling at all. It does not change the spelling. Now, the spelling rules for suffixes. In case if I have a suffix with ed and ing, what are the spelling rules? This is important. Now, in case of words that ends with ed, what happens in terms of spelling changes? The suffix ed makes 3 different sounds. All right. I hope this is visible. If not, I will change the color. I hope this is better. The yellow is better because the screen resolution is different. So, obviously, I couldn't figure which one would be more legible. All right, here we go. The suffix ed makes 3 different sounds. The suffix ed can say the d sound, like in the word begged. We don't say begged, it's begged. Like work is worked, book is booked, it's not booked or talked. So, don't pronounce like that, it's begged, worked, looked, booked. The suffix ed can say the t, like in the word talked. Now, we don't say talked, we don't say talked, it's not a d sound ending, it's a t sound ending. For example, talk becomes talked. The suffix ed can say ed, that's ed, like in the word excited. All right. So if you have a word like excite, the past form excited, then you can say ed as ed form. But if you have a word like work, we don't say worked, we don't say booked, worked. Those are incorrect pronunciation. All right. Now, rule number 1, if a vowel is followed by 2 consonants, just add ed. For example, talk becomes talked, lift becomes lifted. Rule number 1 again, if a vowel is followed by 2 consonants, so just add ed, that is the suffix. Okay. So talk becomes talked, lift becomes lifted. Now what is the vowel here? A is the vowel, L and K is a consonant. I is a vowel, F and T is a consonant. There is a difference between consonant and consonant sound. So I am referring to a consonant, not consonant sound. Rule number 2, if you have a V, a C or E pattern, drop the silent E and add ed. The example is smile will become smiled, race will become raised. Rule number 3, if a vowel is followed by 1 consonant, you must double the last consonant letter and add ed. For example, hug will become hugged, drop will become dropped. I repeat rule number 1, if a vowel is followed by 2 consonants, just add ed. Example, talked, lifted. Because I have the vowel which is A followed by 2 consonant which is L and K. For example, lift, it's I followed by 2 consonant F and T. Rule number 2, if you have VCE pattern, drop the silent E and add ed. For example, I have the word smile, so I will just say ed. I will not say SMILEED, I will drop one E. Same applies for race as well. When I am adding a ed end, I am just dropping one E. So RACED, not RACEED. Rule number 3, if a vowel is followed by 1 consonant, you must double the last consonant. So I have the vowel followed by just 1 consonant, U is followed by G, O is followed by P. So I will double the consonant. So hug past tense will become hugged, drop past tense will become dropped. All right. So that's in terms of ed. Let's look at the words ending with ing. In terms of ing, I need to make a change here, just a moment. When it comes to ing, it just makes one sound. It's as straightforward as that. Rule number 1, if a vowel is followed by 2 consonants, just add ing. For example, I have the vowel A followed by 2 consonant L and K, I am just adding ing, talking, lifting. If you have VCE pattern, drop the silent E and add ing, like smile will become smiling, race will become racing. I am not using the E at all. Rule number 3, if a vowel is followed by 1 consonant, you must double the last consonant. Basically, you are, for example, when I said hugged, I added the consonant. When I said dropped, I added a consonant. The same applies here as well, hugging, dropping. All right. So the first tip, that is in terms of understanding and reading more. Tip number 2 is create flashcards classifying and defining and exemplifying. What do you mean by flashcard? Something like this, which has the list of suffix and it has the meaning. So I have able and IBLE. When I have ADE, I have AGE, I have AL, EN, ER, fix, quick fix, those kind of words. So these are all my list of suffix and these are the meaning. So when you make a flashcard, you will be able to understand what one to use when in what context. Tip number 3, create word webs with examples and explanation. This is extremely powerful. This is an illustration for you. I have the prefix on the left as well as on the right. So I have the word visible. So prefix I can just add invisible. I have the word sane, I can add insane. I have capable, I can say incapable. Complete, incomplete. Now when I am adding an IN, it's become an antonym also. Pay attention. It's also becoming an opposite word. When I am adding UN, the words are important, the opposite is unimportant. Lock, unlock, clean, unclean. When I am adding MIS, miss, as a prefix. Behave, misbehave, place, misplace, kick, miskick, place, misplace. When I am using RE, basically I am doing it again. For example, replace, reheat, rewrite, restart. So IN, UN, MIS and RE, it's conveying different meaning, it's changing the meaning. On the right you see letters added to front of a word change meaning of a word. For example, I am. Possible, I am is impossible, it changes the meaning. Opposite again. Movable, immovable. Patient, impatient. DIS as a prefix. Appear, disappear. Like, dislike. Agree, disagree. Inform, misinform. So these are some of the examples which I am trying to give you, where by adding a prefix, the meaning of the word also changes. Alright. Now the best and the most important tip to learn prefix and suffix. Use the new words when you write and speak. Identify them when you read or listen. Like the other day, to build vocabulary, I was telling you, learn one new word a day, find out the meaning of the word, find out the substitute words and start using those words in your general communication while you're talking to people, while you're writing something. Have the habit of reading and writing, and that is the best way to learn communication faster than anybody else. Alright? So that was about prefix and suffix. So I hope this was helpful. You can re-watch this entire program. Just look for the link on YouTube. You can watch it again. If you have questions, do post your questions. I will take a look and provide you with the answer. And the next segment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a lot of questions. That's going to be a practice session for us, which will gauge us on grammar and vocabulary as well. Alright. So I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next session. Thank you so much.